Well, I thank you all again for welcoming me into your wonderful country. I have been very much a welcome guest here. Deacon Michael has taken good care of me for the past several days of his retreat. I am enthralled with the beauty of this wonderful place. It's magical. And again, thank you all for welcoming me so graciously. Today, again, we celebrate a solemn Mass to change this man into a new person. Once one receives the indelible mark of priesthood, one is forever changed in a profound and mystical way. There's good and bad news to this that I would like to share with you. The bad news, let's start with that. You've all been duped, we all have, myself included, into thinking that all of this is Christianity. This is not Christianity. This is a vehicle that leads to the divine life, and that's all it was ever meant to be. Orders of priests, bishops, deacons, ritual, funny hats. The reality is, it's an expression of something that man has not yet been able to express through the limited faculties that he has at his disposal. And if this were all there was, then I would say let's just stand up and walk on out of here. Forget this ever happened. Fortunately, there is good news. And that good news is that there is a path that leads us to the end. And that end is what we've tried so hard as a civilization for so many years to define. We call it Christianity. Some call it Hinduism. Some call it Buddhism. Some call it shamanism. Some call it Islam, Judaism. The truth is, and it is quite a perennial truth, the substance of the divine life cannot be categorized or expressed adequately. So we do our best, don't we? So pervasive is the con that we've been scammed by our own expectations. We've been duped by our own cultural biases, personal biases, into thinking this is the divine life. So what do we have left? People leaving the church, people feeling out of touch, and unfortunately, the secular world is all that remains, and for the most part doesn't deal with these higher truths at all. So it leaves a culture and civilization that is without connection. And that's the beginning of the end of civilization. Joseph Campbell talks about that. If I had more time, we could discuss it. In his book, Lost Christianity, Jacob Needleman reports an experience that I think is relevant I'd like to share with you. Meeting with bishops, priests, ministers, and rabbis across America and in Europe, I soon became aware that a great deal of soul-searching was going on And not only in reaction to the unconventional religiosity of the young, I began to suspect that the new religions were not the only sign that a new life was being breathed into the dying spiritual practices of our culture. I wondered, was there perhaps a secret fermentation going on, as well as within the seeming confusion of the old religions? By old religions, he's talking about the big three in the West, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. New religions, he's talking about Buddhism and Hinduism that have come over, transcendental meditation, and some of the Eastern practices that have been shared with our culture in recent decades. He continues, certainly the hunger of those who wished to remain within the fold of Christianity was often as intense as, sometimes even more so than, the motivation of many people turning to the religions of the Orient. In fact, of all the experiences I had while researching the material for my book on the new religions, none has remained more firmly in my memory than my meeting with a certain bishop. We had been talking for several hours about the attractions of the Eastern religions. Toward the end of the interview, coffee and sandwiches were brought in, and I put away my notebook. Conversation became informal and unguarded. I mentioned to him that in my own academic work as a professor of philosophy and religion, I had begun to perceive things in the Bible that I had never dreamed were there. I was beginning to understand that everything I had seen in the Eastern teachings was also contained in Judaism and Christianity. Although the language of the Bible was practically impossible to penetrate because it had become so encrusted with familiar associations. At that, he quickly nodded in agreement, with a sort of knowingness that somehow made me uncomfortable. For the next few minutes, I couldn't believe I was speaking with the same man. Gone was the relaxed, genial conversationalist. Even his voice suddenly lost its resonance. He spoke nervously of the efforts he was making to bring contemplative methods into the life of his diocese. He was working closely with several well-known humanistic psychologists and had himself studied Zen meditation with this aim in mind. Everything he said seemed completely lacking in conviction. He was constantly scanning my face for some sign of approval. And this eventually made me so ill at ease that I blurted out in a half-joking way, "Well, I've always imagined that you leaders of the church have a secret monastery someplace where you go to refresh your inner lives under the direction of a wise spiritual guide." I was quite startled by his reaction. He leaned toward me over the top of his huge desk, and without any pretense or sense of position, asked simply, where is it? That's the spirit of the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church. That's why this tradition was established by my own convictions and those of my colleagues. We never wanted to be reactionaries. We love the Church of Rome. We love the Orthodox churches. We love the Protestant churches. The variations of Anglican churches, and all the religions, both Christian in orientation or otherwise. We love them. We embrace them. Because we are non-dogmatic. And that's the difference. We have doctrines, yeah. You see it here. We're celebrating a Mass. Very Christian and Roman Catholic in its form. In fact, probably indistinguishable for most of you. Very few variations that we've made. The reason and the purpose behind it is that's our doctrine of expression. It's one vehicle that we have come together and chosen to establish a path that we can walk together. So we're not alone on that journey. The church is like a little scooter that gets you to this great destination. This lost Christianity is like a starship that brings us at light speed to the divine. This is accessible to anyone who wants it. We don't limit anyone. We don't enforce beliefs or doctrines. In fact, we would rather choose you don't have any. We don't force dogmatic thinking. Some traditions require this, and we respect that. But there needs to be someone that's doing it another way. For those that slip through the cracks, and those don't feel the church is relevant, and those that have lost their connection with what Christianity is. This is why we're doing this. And this is why we have our Deacon Michael Thorne with us, a fellow colleague who understands, perhaps a bit reluctantly, the daunting task that is set out before him in establishing a church, which I call Christianity 2.0, because it's a reboot. It's a reboot of something I think that was started a long time ago by men whose names you've probably forgotten, that we remember as Matthew and John. The message of Jesus Christ is a perennial truth. It transcends religion. It transcends tradition. It transcends human expectation. So I ask you, as you continue on throughout this service with us, that you keep in mind what I have just shared with you. These are expressions, non-dogmatic truths. They might speak to you, they might not. It's okay. The point is, divine life is available. Seek after it.